In the 1990s, the principle of community-based natural resource management, Cbnrm, was adopted in Namibia under the conservancy model.
We didn't start the concept. We learned it from earlier examples in Zimbabwe and in Zambia. As every country started to implement this kind of conservation strategy, there's opportunity for changing the focus slightly to fit better with local conditions and possibly to try new variations on the same theme.
When we had our independence in 1990, the first thing was to do some assessment and see where this program could be implemented. We need to understand that people came from a system of apartheid where land was actually taken away from them, and some of them were actually resettled on very, very poor land. This was called the homelands, just like in South Africa.
Rural communities had no rights over wildlife whatsoever, and essentially saw wildlife as belonging to the government of the day, which was not a government that they had elected. And therefore they had little allegiance towards wildlife and little support for wildlife habitat. And wildlife populations were really at very low levels in the communal lands.
As a result, whatever policy we were trying to implement in our rural areas, we had to convince these communities and also build trust with them that they will keep their land. They also thought that they needed to get rid of livestock.
Livestock can be compatible with wildlife, but it has to be managed carefully, and incentives have to be put in place for people to be tolerant of wildlife. In fact, I am surprised they are as tolerant as they are if you compare with how ranchers and agriculturalists react in Western countries when they see wolves or other predators around their livestock.
We had to incentivize that they were going to get benefits back from that particular land. And so we started working with civil society organizations. Programs such as WWF and funding from USAID was very critical at the beginning of the program, and also having policies being changed within government to make sure that there is an enabling environment for this program to be implemented. So we chose 4 communities. There was a criteria in terms of how we choose those communities. They had different challenges in terms of their geographical setup, different tribal communities, some of them close to national parks, some of them completely removed from national parks, and I want to emphasize it was voluntarily.
We've seen actually the support for democracy through this program. Democracy in the sense that communities for themselves decide whether they want to be part of this program or not, and how they've created structures to achieve representation and management and governance of their joint affairs and their resources.
In just 6 years or so, they saw the return of that land use. They then started trusting that they could integrate, for instance, tourism or hunting. It was integrating the land use rather than changing the land use.
So we have seen very important changes, and we've seen how people have flourished through this. We've seen emergence of young, talented people, lots of women who are now active members of this process in societies where women and youth didn't really have much chance in the past.